Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom's back and welcome back to another episode of Overrated or Overpowered. Yes, this is part 3 of the series that you guys love so much and I love making for you guys as well. If you don't know, this series is basically where I take, highly hyped up cars from PL20 or Update 20, however way you want to call it, and see if they're actually worth the hype and if they are overpowered or overrated. So I want to start off today's episode with a correction. In the last episode, I talked about the Hyundai Kona N, and I rated it only up against front-wheel drive hatchback cars when it's actually classified as an SUV in the game. Now, to be fair, I do apologize. I totally flew over my head that this was classified as an SUV in top drives. I don't know why, I just didn't think that it was an SUV. It doesn't really look like an SUV. I don't own the car either, so I don't have any first-hand experience with the car, but I don't think I was entirely wrong, but I'll get to that later. Let's compare it against SUVs, okay? So we're going to start off with the Hyundai Kona N, of course. So let's look at the times against SUVs. Now, immediately I was already very bored to compare it against just SUVs, because the only competition it truly really had were the Subaru Forester STI and the Subaru Forester TS300. The only other car that was an SUV at performance tires was a Hyundai Enduro CUV, which is also a brand new car, and it's just so far off in RQ50. So within its niche, within its very, very small niche of SUV cars, SUV performance tire cars, it's the best. In literally everything. It's literally the best in everything. Like only Canyon Tour, but that's because the Hyundai Kona N doesn't have a time for Canyon Tour. The moment someone puts that in, it's going to be the better car for sure. So I decided, you know what, this is too boring of a comparison. Let me add some cars where I think I might give it a little bit of competition. So I threw in the Dodge Magnum SRT8, which is an estate, and also, mono drive, and it doesn't really beat it. Then I also threw in the Mercedes-Benz R63 AMG, and again, it's actually one of the worst cars here. That being said, though, when we move on to drags, this is where the R63 really comes into power. Obviously, the Hyundai Kona N is known for having, good MRA. It's 8C MRA. So how does it fare against the R63 AMG? Well, the answer is not very well. But then again, it's very hard to compare the car because it's kind of in its own niche. It's in its own land. You know what I mean? Like, it's RQ63 to 59. It isn't even that fair of a comparison. Like, I can't find another RQ59 or RQ60, SUV performance tire mono drive car. There isn't any. The only closest competitions would be the Subarus, where both of them are 4-wheel drive, so their RQs are inflated anyway. That being said, though, in my initial video in last episode, where some people said that I was wrong to compare it against front-wheel drive cars, I don't necessarily think that it was actually wrong. Yes, the Hyundai Kona N is not a hatchback, even though it looks like one. It's not a hatchback, but it is a medium ground clearance front-wheel drive car. So I feel like my comparisons where I compared it with front-wheel drive medium cars are still valid, because this is a car that you can deploy in front-wheel drive clubs very often, so it's good to know how good it's going to be among its competition, and it's already pretty good against the front-wheel drive cars. It's really only losing in the drags of the Ford Focus RS500, but when it comes to the more twisty stuff against front-wheel drive medium ground clearance cars, it tends to falter a lot more. That being said, though, I did not take into account its niche, being an SUV, in the second part of this video, or the second episode of the series, so I'm gonna bump it up a little bit. I don't think it's Blossom choice, but as you can see, this is where I rated it in the last video. I'm gonna move it up ever so slightly. It's definitely above average, way above average, but I don't think it's Blossom choice, even though it's the best in that niche. All right, moving on now. Next car I want to talk about, this is a car that a lot of people have been calling for in the comments, and this is a car that I enjoy very much. I have two maxed out in my garage. One is 969, and the other is 699, and it is a fantastic car, let me tell you. So straight up, let's put it within its niche. 4-wheel drive, low ground clearance performance tire cars. In the wet, as you can see, it wins the majority of the races. In fact, it wins every single race when it only comes to super rares, so much so that I had to put in ultra rares as well, where I put in the RQ52 Visconti and the RQ52 Audi TT as well. Now, against super rares, it is the best car in every aspect besides slalom. Slalom is the only place where it tends to be a little bit weaker in. As you can see, it also loses to the Eagle Talon TSI and the Audi TT. That being said though, even against ultra competition, it remains the best car for the G-Force, the car park, the twisty circuit rolling, twisty road, fast circuit, Monaco. As you can see, the list just goes on. You take away the ultra rares and it's going to be the best one for hairpin and karting as well. So really impressive from the Hyundai. Moving on to dry, as you can see, it still remains very dominant, being the best possible car within its niche for car park, G-Force, twisty circuit, twisty road, fast circuit, beating cars within its RQ, below its RQ, and above its RQ as well. So the Hyundai, very impressive. One more thing that I want to show you is how well it compares on the drags, and even in that scenario, it still beats the ultra rares and the super rares, even with its low top speed, because it has the strongest MRA. It is very strong, only losing to the 1 mile to the Ford Visas or Visas, whatever way you want to call it, and the 0 to 120 to the Mitsubishi Tarmac, which still really weird name. Why would you call your car Tarmac? But I digress. The Hyundai is really strong and definitely is, in my opinion, Blossom choice. Actually, there's one more thing that I do want to show you actually, and that is like comparing it to just Japanese cars. So Japanese cars, that's it. Like, this is even outside its wheelhouse. Like, I'm not comparing the Hyundai to, you know, just four-wheel drive low ground clearance cars. I'm literally comparing it to front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive performance tire cars now. And yeah, as you can see, not as good on the twisty stuff, but still the best car in the fast circuit and fast circuit rolling. For it to be the best in 2 races against cars that is not even within its niche is really impressive, honestly. And yes, at the top, as you can see, this will be a recurring thing throughout this episode where I just say dominant, because the moment I put in the times for the Infiniti G37, it wins everything, and it kind of just undervalues everything else I'm trying to show. So it undervalues the point I'm trying to make, that the Hyundai actually is the second best option amongst all Japanese super rare cars that have performance tires as well. So that's really impressive. But like I said, guys, in my opinion, it's Blossom choice. And I gotta say, this update is bringing a lot of Blossom choice cars, so that's why it's taking a while. It's a lot of changes coming up, but yeah, really good car. It is the super rare 4-wheel drive low ground clearance performance tire car to go for, and it's highly versatile. Moving on to the third car is going to be the Hyundai Veloster Grappler. I feel like in this series, right, overrated or overpowered, I think the most frequent brand has been Hyundai. Like, I've featured this brand so many times. They are really good in the game, my goodness. But that streak might end with this one though. The Hyundai Veloster Grappler. Okay, so comparing it against, like, you know, just off-road tire cars, whether it's front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, yeah, it's not good at anything. And yeah, for an RQ54 being one of the highest RQ cars in this comparison, it's a little bit sad that it's losing to cars like the Fiat, like the 52 Fiat, the 53 Fiat. Also losing on the motocross track to the Ford Bronco, which is RQ50, 4 RQ less, but I get it. Ford Bronco is four-wheel drive, but then people are going to argue, wait, it's not fair because the Hyundai is not four-wheel drive. Why are you comparing it to other four-wheel drives? Well, then I would argue it's not fair to compare it to other front-wheel drives because all front-wheel drives are medium ground clearance or low ground clearance, and the Hyundai is high ground clearance like the four-wheel drive cars. So the Hyundai Veloster is kind of in this like bubble by itself. But within this bubble, it doesn't really win anything. So as you can see over here, it doesn't win anything against, you know, just any kind of car, any kind of off-road tire car. So I decided to make it a little bit more niche. How about we just compare the Hyundai against high ground clearance cars? So we take away those high handling, medium ground clearance, and low ground clearance off-road tire cars. Well, even if you put it up against, you know, high ground clearance cars, it doesn't win anything. You know what I mean? Like, it still loses to the Mitsubishi L200, which is probably a car that you'll see in part 4 of this video. But yeah, it still loses to that, loses to the Bronco, and it's just one of the worst cars. It even loses to the RQ50 Ford Ranger Raptor. So So where do you really want me to compare the Hyundai? If I put it up against solely just front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive off-road tire cars, it'll be the worst car besides motocross. If I put it up against, four-wheel drive high ground clearance cars with less handling per se, it's still the worst car. So it's like, where do you want me to compare the Veloster? A little bit better on the dirt. Like, as you can see, it's the best car for the hairpin and the rallycross mixed stuff, and I think that's really where it's going to shine, on the mixed stuff against like high ground clearance four-wheel drive off-roaders. But the issue of the Hyundai Veloster is that it just isn't that good. In my opinion, it's just average, actually slightly under average. It's a very niche car. The only time I feel like the Veloster would be really useful is on those mixed track sets that's half dirt, half asphalt, and that is only against other high ground clearance cars, because on those mixed track sets, if you put in cars like, the Fiats, for example, they're just going to be better, right? Literally only select dirt races of high ground clearance, like literally just front wheel drive motocross, that's it. Because like if it's like any motocross, any off-road tire, you'd use the Bronco. So only if it's limited to front wheel drive or rear wheel drive, where this is where the Veloster will actually be useful in. So it's really just, I don't know, man. You can still get value out of it, right? Still off-road tires, it's still high ground clearance, it's still 86 handling. But it really isn't that good, and in my opinion, it's just slightly under average. It's just, it's so niche. All right, moving on. The first legendary in the series, I think this was requested by Elliot, is the Mazda MX5 GT race car. Now, on paper, this car looks like a heaping pile of garbage, but it actually really isn't. So I compared it up against, RQ80s, 81s, 82s, and as you can see, it's actually really good. And the main thing about the Mazda MX-5 GT race car is that it has this outlier stat where its 0 to 60 is so incredibly low compared to its competition, where it has this short burst acceleration that no other RQ80 can provide. So it's kind of a thing in its own, and as you can see, against other RQ80s, it's the best car for G-force, hairpin, indoor karting circuit, etc., etc. It's even better than the Lamborghini Huracan, and it's even better than the Mercedes-AMG GTR. The Mercedes-AMG GTR does pull its own weight when it comes to the faster stuff, like twisty circuit, fast circuit rolling, all that kind of stuff. But that being said, though, the MX-5 GT race car really is a discount version of the Caterham Superlight. Again, as you can see, dominant, because the moment I put in the Caterham times, the Caterham is going to win everything besides the fast circuit and Canyon Tour. Obviously, it'll lose to the AMG GTR. But outside of that, the Mazda MX-5 is actually just a discount Superlight. And I think we all know what we feel about the Superlight. It's incredibly overpowered. Well, back when it was an epic, now as a legendary, I think everyone can agree it deserves 81, 82. So the Mazda MX-5 GT race car actually isn't that bad. It's rightly rated, and it's just showcasing that the other RQ80s are just terrible. Especially that Audi, dude. Especially that Audi. But anyway, moving on, I want to compare it to Epics. More so fully upgraded Epics this time as well. And against Epics, and this time, as you can see, the Mazda is also fully upgraded. It's the best car for hairpin and karting circuit, but it still loses to the KTM Expo RR. But outside of the KTM Expo, it does beat some other high-profile Epics. The MX-5 GT is a better car compared to the Ginetta G50, the Aston Martin Vantage, the Audi R8, like all these heavy-hitting RQ79s and 78. So I think that the Mazda MX-5 does deserve its place as a legendary. It definitely is better than some of the best Epics, aside the KTM Expo, which some people might even argue could be a legendary. But yeah, I think it's alright, and it actually isn't that bad. The only issue about this car is that you don't want to max out an RQ80 like that. That being said, though, like I said, I think it's above average. I think as far as an RQ80 goes, it's actually pretty good. I think a lot of us can agree that the Superlight is a good car, and the MX-5 is a slightly worse version of that good car, which doesn't make it bad. So I think it's above average, but it is a no Blossom Choice legendary. Nah, I'm not going that far, buddy. All right, moving on now. The Mitsubishi L200. This is a very interesting one. It's a very dominant car. When it comes to all-surface tires, rare, it's the best. Just outright, it's the best. It only loses to the Kuga and Slalom for some reason, even though the Kuga actually handles less. than the Mitsubishi L200, but it's the best. I even put in some select super rare all-surface tire cars where the Mitsubishi L200 is capable of beating. It's not capable of beating every super rare RQ40 all-surface tire, but it is capable of beating the Ford F250, the Infiniti QX4, the Mitsubishi L200, ironically, and the Nissan Xterra as well. So it is very impressive there. And again, when it comes to snow and sand and ice, it's usually the best car for most cases. That being said, though, even though it is so dominant, we need to remember that the all-surface tire niche is freaking useless. At the end of the day, like, we're barely in the situation where we are forced to use all-surface tires. In top drives, off-road is off-road. That's it. And you'd rather just use off-road tires. So you want to use the Triton Ultimate Edition or whatever it is from the last episode. It's going to be the better car everywhere. So yes, it's the best in its niche, but its niche is useless. And because of that, I'm going to put it slightly above average. If you find yourself where you are forced to use an all-surface tire rare, then the Mitsubishi L200 is the car to use. But that doesn't make it Blossom choice in any reason, because like I said, the niche itself is freaking useless. Alright, moving on, the Hyundai Veloster N TCR. Now this is a car where I think a lot of people got excited about, because usually when you think of a high-handling front-wheel drive car, and this is really good at MRA as well, you would think, oh, it's going to be a prize car, but this one isn't. So how good is it actually? Well, against front-wheel drive slick tire cars, not that good. When it comes to twisty track sets, it's actually pretty weak behind the Nissan Primera, the Laguna, which are the same RQ. It's actually even worse than the RQ71 Mazda 3 TCR in some cases. It is weaker in the G-force, as you can see. It is weaker in the hairpin, the indoor karting, as well as the karting circuit, and they tie on the slalom. So, even, like, you know, within that same APGP niche, a car that is lower MRQ is better than the Hyundai Veloster. But where it really shines is that, you know, with its MRA, it's really good on the fast circuit, and when it comes to the drags, it is the best option there, beating the Laguna, beating the Primera, the RS3. So if anything, guys, the Hyundai Veloster N TCR is a car that you might want to consider 332ing. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it really is something that you would consider, because in the twisties, it isn't going to beat anything already, but in the drags, that's where it becomes dominant. That being said, though, we take it out of its niche. Let's compare it just against Epic 72s, right? Yeah, no, just don't do that. The thing about the Hyundai Veloster is that yes, it has MRA, yes, it handles very well, but the 0 to 60 is just really terrible. And you know, in those kind of scenarios, you're better off using like a rear-wheel drive car, like a Lotus Motorsport, at least for that example. And then when it comes to the drags, I didn't even put the times for the drags. But if I were to change all these tracks into the drags, even though the Hyundai Veloster is really good at MRA, it's going to lose to the Viper. The Viper SRT10 is going to be the car for the drags, as you can tell from its fast circuit time. So overall, I think that it's okay. Like, it's a strong front-wheel drive dragster, but nothing more. Against, you know, 72 epics and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't hold a candle to those guys. But MRA is good, handling is good, can't really go wrong with that. But it isn't going to be Blossom choice. I think a lot of people thought that this was going to be Blossom choice. No, it's not going to be. I think it's like in between the average of Blossom choice. It's like daily driver category. It's good, you know, but it's not great. Moving on now is the Mazda RX7 Evo Group B. This is an interesting one, actually, because a lot of people thought that this was going to be really good, but I gotta tell you, it actually isn't. So the Mazda RX7 Group B in the dirt scenarios, as you can see, is pretty bad. Handling is everything when it comes to off-road meta, and as you can see, I've even put it up against some four-wheel drive cars that are lower in RQ, like the Ford F-150s and the Hyundai Moab. It doesn't really hold a candle, really. I mean, against the Porsche Cayman, it's a better car on the mixed stuff, and then it loses to the Lotus Exige, because again, handling is everything, and the Exige has 99 handling, and the saddest thing is that, you know, even if you take away all these heavy hitters, it can't even compete with the legend that is the Lancia 037 Rally. The Mazda RX7 Evo is worse compared to the Rally in the G-force, in the twisty road, in the twisty circuit, in the slalom, in even motocross, for crying out loud, you name it. Yeah, no, yeah, not very good. That being said, though, the RX-7 does have MRA, and because of that, it is better when it comes to off-road drives. As you can see, it beats the Ford and the Lancia and the Exige. The only issue is for one RQ more, you can just use the Porsche Cayman GT4, and again, it's just incredibly dominant. The moment I allow to show the times for the Porsche, it's going to be green, 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 green. It's gonna win everything. So the Mazda RX-7 is just second best, really. One more thing I want to show is this on-road performance, right? So not even off-road. Again, it's the second best on fast circuit, and it just loses everywhere else to the RQ67 Lotus XT. So for an RQ74, it's kind of just sad. If anything, it's just average. You know, most of these rear-wheel drive off-road tire cars, they have high expectations. People usually think that they are really good because for the most part, they are really good. But in the case with the RX7 Evo, it's just If anything, it's honestly a slightly worse version of the Ford Escort, and you already know what I feel about that. So yeah, not that good, to be honest. It's a fantastic photo of a really beautiful car that is a bit too high in RQ, if you ask me. Moving on now, last but not least, is the Mazda RX8 NRA. This is a very interesting one. Against RQ44s and 45s, it is a very dominant car. It looks like the next best mid-range RQ twisty car. Because that was held as a Blossom Choice car by the Mazda Yota for quite some while. But as you can see, it is the better car for hairpin, ties on the inner karting with the Fiat 695, karting circuit, twisty road. So it looks good. It looks good. That being said, though, as you can see, I'm comparing it against some pretty good 44s and 45s, but not the best. So how well does it really compete against the actual big boys, the actual Blossom Choice cars? And the thing is, it's not that bad against actual Blossom Choice cars like the Jetta G40 and the Lotus Elise and the C2R2. It actually is like the second best car against twisty circuit and hairpin. So if you take away the Lotus Elise Sprint, it actually is the best car for the hairpin road and the twisty circuit. And that's saying a lot because this is RQ44 compared to the Lotus's 48, and it actually beats the C2R2 on the hairpin and the twisty circuit. And again, that's a really good car, right? And it's one RQ more expensive than the RX8. And on top of that, it's the best car for the fast circuit, rolling, and the fast circuit. So I know what you guys are thinking. Oh my god, it's able to beat like 48, 46, 45 Blossom Choices on a fast circuit. This car has to be absolutely amazing. The thing is, though, saying that the RX8 is good on the fast circuit is saying that it's the best of, you know, really bad cars. Like, all of these cars are really bad on the fast circuit already. So the RX8 is just the best of the worst. It's the shiniest turd of them all. You don't really compare these cars on fast circuit. When you think about the Lotus Elise and the C2R2 and the 208, you think of twisty track sets, you know what I mean? And again, there's a very big RQ disparity here, 48, 46, 45, 44, 42, 41. So let me just show you that the fast circuit time, although it looks impressive in this comparison, actually isn't. As you can see, that's where the RX8 stands in terms of fast circuit. So the car that's all the way at the top, which I believe is the RQ49 Porsche Taycan, is the best car for the Super Air fast circuit, and then all the way down is the RX8. So it's not that good, to be honest. It's a strong car, and as an RQ44, it definitely is very impressive. Though, is it going to break Blossom Choice? That's a different question. I think it's really good. I'm gonna put it on the wait list. It's definitely better than the Trans Am. So if I were to take the Trans Am out of Blossom Choice, there's a very high chance that I would bring the RX8 in. But then again, having the RX8 and the C2R2 together in Blossom Choice is a little bit counterintuitive. I don't know. Like I said, I'm going to put this on the wait list. It might be a Blossom Choice if there is space, but it's not like oh, it must be a Blossom Choice. It's close. It's close. But I'm going to put it on the wait list for now. It's a good car though. That being said, like if I'm asking the question whether or not it should be Blossom Choice, it's already defaulted to being a very, very good car. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree or disagree with my picks. Let me know what cars you want to see in part 4. More legendaries, more commons. I think a lot of people want to see that Daimyo, so I'll probably bring that in. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too. Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to Jacksonville
Atlantic.
Blonde hair, don't care, look like Leslie Brooks. Pin up girls